The story of Native American Heritage Month begins long before anyone decided to put it on a calendar. It starts with the first peoples of the continent, whose history stretches back thousands of years. Their presence shaped the land in ways that are still visible today. Tribes built communities, traded across long distances, created complex systems of governance, and passed down stories that carried the memory of generations. The month that now exists to honor them is only a recent attempt to acknowledge a much deeper history, one built on identity, survival, and connection to the land. Long before Europeans arrived, hundreds of tribes lived across the continent. Each had its own languages, beliefs, and ways of understanding the world. The ties between people and land were strong. The land was a source of food, medicine, and spiritual meaning. Rivers were pathways that connected distant communities. Seasons shaped the rhythm of life. Every tradition, from planting to healing, reflected an understanding of nature learned over centuries. This knowledge wasn't written in books. It was passed from elders to children through stories, songs, and ceremonies. These traditions survived wars, disease, and displacement, carried by those who refused to let them disappear. When colonization began, everything changed. Tribes faced violence, broken promises, and forced relocation. Millions were pushed from their ancestral homelands. Communities that had lived in the same place for countless generations were told to leave and start again somewhere unfamiliar. The pressure was relentless, and the attempts to erase native identity were intentional. Government policies banned languages, outlawed ceremonies, and separated families. Yet, despite everything, native communities held on to what they could. They gathered in secret, kept stories alive, and found ways to protect what remained of their traditions. The idea that the United States should officially recognize native contributions too. The growth of Native American Heritage Month after its official recognition in 1990 didn't happen by accident. It expanded because native communities kept pushing the country to understand that the month should not be a symbolic gesture. It should be a doorway into deeper learning. Museums, schools, and cultural institutions started developing programs that highlighted the vast diversity of native nations. People discovered that native history was not one story but hundreds, each shaped by unique landscapes, traditions, and struggles. As awareness spread, more communities began holding events that focused on culture, language, and the stories passed down by elders. Many tribes used the month as an opportunity to reconnect younger generations with traditions that had been weakened by decades of forced assimilation. Elders shared songs and stories that had survived because someone had held on to them during the hardest times. Language classes grew, and cultural workshops gained attention. There was a renewed understanding that culture isn't preserved through institutions alone. It survives through the people who live it every day. During November, tribes often opened their doors to visitors who wanted to learn. Powwows, craft demonstrations, and historical talks helped change the way many Americans viewed native identity. The month also began to highlight the painful chapters of native history that had often been ignored. More people learned about the boarding school era, when native children were taken from their families and forced to abandon their languages and traditions. These stories became part of public discussions during November, encouraging people to understand the long-term impact of those policies. The more the country learned, the more people understood that the month was not only about celebrating culture. It was also about acknowledging what native communities had survived. In classrooms across the country, teachers started using November to introduce S. As Native American Heritage Month moved into the 21st century, it became more than an annual tradition. It turned into a reflection of the ongoing relationship between native communities and the rest of the country. The month began to show how Indigenous identity was evolving in a modern world while staying rooted in traditions that had survived centuries of change. It also highlighted the balance native nations worked to maintain between preserving culture and navigating new challenges that came with technology, politics, and economic development. Tribes across the country used the month to show that Indigenous life wasn't frozen in the past. It was dynamic and full of innovation. Native entrepreneurs built successful businesses in technology, energy, and tourism. Young Native activists used social media to raise awareness about issues that had long been ignored. Artists blended traditional methods with modern techniques, creating work that reached audiences far beyond tribal communities. The message was clear. Native American Heritage Month wasn't about looking back with a sense of loss. It was about recognizing the strength of communities that continued to adapt while protecting what made them unique. One of the strongest themes that emerged during the month was the revival of language. Many native languages were endangered because of the boarding school era, when children were punished for speaking their mother tongues. Language loss was one of the deepest wounds left by forced assimilation. But in recent years, tribes invested heavily in revitalization programs. Some created immersion schools where children spent entire days hearing and speaking their ancestral language. Elders worked with linguists to record words and stories that had never been written down. Apps, online dictionaries, and digital lessons brought language learning into the modern world. During November, these efforts received national attention, giving people a chance to see how vital the deeper meaning of Native American Heritage Month becomes clearer when you look at how it shapes the country's understanding of history, identity, and responsibility. The month has become a space where the past and present meet. It invites people to understand the experiences of the first peoples of the land, not as stories locked in time but as part of the nation's ongoing story. By the time the month reaches its fourth week, the focus often shifts to reflection. People look back at what they learned, what conversations took place and how much further the country needs to go. One of the most important impacts of the month is the way it reshapes public memory. For generations, Indigenous history was either erased or presented in ways that ignored Native perspectives. Textbooks offered simplified narratives that downplayed the suffering caused by colonization. Museums displayed artifacts without acknowledging the people they belonged to. Landscapes were renamed without recognizing the original caretakers of the land. Native American Heritage Month helps correct these gaps by encouraging institutions to return to the truth. More museums have worked with tribes to return sacred items and human remains. Historical sites now include information that explains the indigenous connection to those places. These changes help rebuild a more honest understanding of the country's past. The month also inspires people to reflect on what justice means. For Native communities, justice includes honoring treaties, protecting sacred lands, improving access to healthcare, expanding educational opportunities and recognizing tribal sovereignty. During November, these issues appear in news reports, discussions and public forums. The conversations help people understand that justice isn't just symbolic. It requires action from governments, institutions and citizens. Each year, the month encourages more people to support Native-led organizations, volunteer in community programs and advocate.